Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today for a Great Decisions presentation featuring Henry Berman. Today's presentation is a collaboration of the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, the Ramsey County Library, the Foreign Policy Association, and Global Minnesota.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very, very much for your participation today in this most interesting topic, profile of the country of India in 2025. And India has been very much in the news. They continue to be, and we'll talk to that as we proceed, as the talk kind of unfolds. First of all, if I may, let me get into our slides here. There we go. Okay, good. Great decisions topic on India in 2025. In about 2 years ago, in the fall of 2023, a very momentous event took place in the history of the world, literally in the history of the world, and that is India surpassed China as the most populous country in the world. It now has about almost 1.5 billion people. And due to the demographics in China and in India, this was not a surprise. This was expected to happen at some point. And now India has that label. And we'll be talking throughout this talk about their most dramatic and impressive asset in India, which is its demographics, which are its people, and it's literally its size. And of course, what is an advantage can also be a burden from time to time. So with that, let's proceed. Let's see here. Okay, this is a broad-based outline of what I'll be talking about today. I'm always a big advocate on geography, so we will be looking at a few maps to start things out. We'll talk about demographics and the importance of demographics. One of the other things that we'll be referencing and contrasting throughout this, I didn't reference it on this page, but is the ongoing conflict with Pakistan. And it seems like this conflict, which is pretty much ignored by the rest of the world in so many ways, and it shouldn't be. And we'll talk about that as we go along here. Uh, I'm going to spend a little time historically about the Indian embrace of neutrality and how that has been utilized, how that's been a leader, the terms of what neutral nations are called throughout time, and their growing power in the world. We'll talk a little bit to that point as well. Uh, Another thing we'll spend a lot of time on is Narendra Modi. Narendra Modi is the leader of the Prime Minister of India, has been there in control since 2014. He has changed a lot of things. He has been truly a transformative leader, and we're going to talk to that and how that has actually played out, okay, in over the last decade. We'll talk about the war in Kashmir, the ongoing conflict with Pakistan. Where is Kashmir? What's the story with Kashmir? Where do things stand now with Kashmir? Lastly, we'll talk about India's relationships, not just with Pakistan or with China, which is also very big, and to some extent with Russia, but primarily with the United States. Relatively speaking, the relationship since India's independence in 1947 has been harmonious, has been very positive. It's had some bumps on the road, and right now there's kind of a little bit of a lull in that relationship. We will talk to that and what the causes are for that, and if we can overcome that collectively. Let's stick to a map. And this is what India is so large, and India is part of Asia. And Asia in and of itself is so large that this section of Asia is often referred to as the Indian subcontinent, the Indian subcontinent. And these are the countries in the Indian subcontinent. There are 7 countries here, okay, in this area. To the south of India is an island nation called Sri Lanka, which is in the Indian Ocean because of its location, is very, very important in the context of trade. Other countries that are nearby, it shares a 19-mile border up to the northwest. India has a border with Pakistan. You see Pakistan there. And then just to the northwest of Pakistan is Afghanistan. Okay. Also, the other countries are two landlocked countries and relatively impoverished countries of Nepal and Bhutan, Bhutan, Nepal and Bhutan. Uh, Very, very mountainous. And then lastly is Bangladesh. Bangladesh used to be part of Pakistan, used to be referred to as East Pakistan because of the high number of Muslim population people there at in that area of the woods. So Bangladesh seceded from Pakistan in 1971. And one thing that's interesting about Bangladesh that it is a very, very, very much a lowland geographically. So there historically have been lots and lots of floods in Bangladesh. Historically, also Bangladesh has been relatively impoverished as well. Okay, so those are the seven countries. As you look at, and then of course India, of course, and as you look at the nation of India, it's also divided in many ways, interestingly, by its climate change, differences in climate. In the south, it's primarily a tropical jungle-like environment, very, very hot and humid all times of the year. Okay. In the north, in contrast, is actually pretty mountainous. And in fact, in Nepal, of course, that's where the Himalayas are. And this is where Mount Everest is located. And these are the tallest peaks on the planet. So there's a real contrast there in the south and the northern areas of India. And as I said before, Bangladesh tends to be pretty much below sea level in and of itself. Okay, one other thing to note, which to me is very interesting to be mindful of, if you go from Afghanistan and Pakistan over here on this side to the west, immediately to the west, that country there is Iran. So the Indian subcontinent has a pretty close proximity to the Middle East and all that's going on in the Middle East. And the conflicts in the Middle East do impact the subcontinent in many, many ways. And we'll talk to that as we proceed. And then the final thing on this slide I want to mention is that India and Pakistan have had an ongoing conflict since 1947, an ongoing conflict since 1947. And we will talk more to that. India actually has 29 states. Okay, I'm sorry, 28 states, 28 states and 9 union territories. The states, which are outlined here, and I'm not going to go through every single one of them, they're governed a little bit more independently from the national government than you see in the United States. Okay, these state governments in the overall arch of things have a little bit more say so, and they're a little less beholden to the centralized national government than is in the case of the United States. Some say that this is more like the European Union than the United States of America, the state relationship to the central government. Okay, now the Union territories are territories that include Kashmir and also around the capital of New Delhi. These territories are primarily administered. These are not really states. They are primarily administered by the central government. Similarly to how the District of Columbia is administered by by the national government. Uh, the District of Columbia is not in and of itself a state, and there are other isolated scenarios where that is played out, where they have been called union territories, and they have never really formed a government of their own, a state government in the way that the other places are. States are very interesting in that they have tend to have their own unique kind of languages, culture, styles of government. It's very different than you might say here in the United States in that manner. Okay. One other thing I want to mention to you is over here, all the way over to the west, which is, let me see, Gujarat. This is the home where the current Prime Minister Modi grew up, and he was a state administrator of Gujarat before becoming Prime Minister. So we'll be talking to that in a few minutes. Okay. Uh, the largest cities in India, just to give you an idea of size of the country, 1.5, almost 1.5 billion people. These are the four largest cities in India. Uh, Delhi is an interesting situation. There is a district of Delhi which is called New Delhi. New Delhi is technically the capital of the country. This is where all the national government offices are. The two names, New Delhi and Delhi, tend to be referenced, uh, 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 get confused with one another. It doesn't really matter that much, but literally, New Delhi is a part of the big, massive city which is called Delhi. Uh, it is just huge, busy traffic. I've been there. I never want to drive there in a million years. Uh, there are on the overall, these are generalized approximations. There's about 35 million people in Delhi. It's one of outside of perhaps Tokyo or Mexico City, largest city in the world, uh, and probably one of the most polluted cities in the world. Then there's Mumbai. Mumbai used to be called by its English colonial name, used to be called Bombay. You may have heard of the term Bombay. Bombay, Mumbai is the same city. Okay, Mumbai is more on the western side of the country. Uh, and then they have 22 million people in its general metropolitan area. Calcutta has 20 million people. Calcutta is all the way over on the eastern side of the country near Bangladesh. And then down near the south is a country that's growing in leaps and bounds called Bangalore. Bangalore is the high-tech center of India. My daughter has been in the Bangalore, told me once at the Bangalore airport, which was brand new when she was there a few years ago, was the most high-tech modern airport she'd ever seen in her life. And this is where high tech tends to thrive in the country of India. We'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. Okay, but I wanted just you to see the sense of magnitude of these size. All of these four cities are probably larger. They are larger than our largest city, New York City. Okay, now let's talk demographics. Most populous, by far the most populous uh, nation on earth now. They have surpassed and moving ahead quickly 1.5 billion people, okay, in India. Their land mass, in terms of size of country, they're the seventh largest country in the world. Only countries that are bigger, they're probably about 40% the size of the lower 48 states. Only countries that are bigger, let's see if I can get these right, are Russia, Canada, China, the United States, Brazil, and Australia. Other than that, then comes India, the seventh largest. Very, very important to understand is the whole role of religion and how that drives everything. And very importantly, which I'll get to, how that's changing. 80% approximately the population of India are Hindu. 14% are Muslim, and it's the fastest growing percentage. That's very interesting to me. Okay, Christianity is a very small sector. Sikhs, you've seen or heard of the Sikh religion. It's a very small percentage. And then Buddhism, interesting in India is where Buddhism started, but Buddhism makes for a very small percentage as well. And I want to contrast that a little bit with Pakistan. Pakistan, 96% of the country is Muslim, only 2% are Hindu, and a very, very small percent are Christian. And Pakistan, compared to India, has a military rule versus a democracy in India. And we'll talk about that. It's kind of an illiberal democracy. It's a fragile one, but it is still a democracy in India. And India's GDP is clearly larger, tremendously larger than we have in Pakistan. But the original logic behind the creation of Pakistan, because Pakistan was part of British India as well, is that that section of what was previously British India was primarily Muslim. And the section which is now India is primarily Hindu. And there was a horrific civil war which took place in 1947 when independence was granted to the countries. Okay, moving right to that. This is a scene from 1947. What the British did at that time, and in the past, I've often mentioned a lot about history in a country, understanding that understands helps us grasp what's going on today. I'm just going to focus on history from the standpoint of neutrality and also this war and this hostility between the Muslim population and his Hindu population in this part of the world, in the subcontinent of India. Immediately, when independence was created, the British did a very, very poor job and did no service to the people of this area. There's a lot of similarities to their bad behavior in India in 1947 and then the following year in Palestine, where they basically said there's too much conflict. We don't want to have anything to do with it. We're leaving. It's hardly a way of creating a pathway towards a stable independence. And what happened as soon as they decided they're going to leave is these two groups, the Muslims and the Hindus, on a massive, massive scale, started killing each other. And the Muslims that lived in India, a lot of them were just massacred. There were these mass movements from India by the Muslims to Pakistan, and vice versa. Hindus from Pakistan started moving down towards what is now India. And lots, there was a war going on. It is said that over 1 million people died during this war. I am a believer that this war from beginning in 47 all the way up to now, the world has been kind of indifferent to it. It just kind of lifts its shoulders and just doesn't really care. Notice how there's all sorts of care about the conflict between Israel and Palestine, but not much care here at all. So that's been very, very interesting to me. And one reason that people should pay attention to this conflict, because it has resurfaced, and we'll get to that, they really should pay attention to this conflict, is that both India and Pakistan have nuclear weapons. And who knows, once nuclear weapons are unleashed, just how that could expand and cause lots and lots of problems. In addition to that, both countries today have more and more lethal type of non-nuclear weapons as well. So, because of this situation, in 1947, two countries were created. And there was also an interesting phenomenon that way far over in the east, uh, there was a section far over to the east, adjacent to Burma, now Myanmar. There was a section with lots and lots of Muslims as well. And they also became part of Pakistan. They joined Pakistan and they were called East Pakistan. Okay. They seceded, as I mentioned, in 1971 to create Bangladesh. And the primary reason for that secession was that Bangladesh, the people who lived in that area compared to the core of Pakistan, wanted to be less, I should say, dominated by the West. Pakistan had a little bit stronger outreach to the West. This part of East Pakistan wanted to be more separate from that type of influence. Okay, the leaders in India in 1947, he ruled from 1947 to 1964. Very, very influential guy was a guy named Jawaharlal Nehru. Nehru was everyone kind of knew him as Nehru. And he came from a wealthy family. in India. He was a protege of Mahatma Gandhi. Okay, and he took charge and led for about 20 years. One of his primary goals was neutrality. Okay, was to not get engaged in the Cold War at that time, and to say we're going to be friends with everybody, and to try to put this fine line together that the group of countries that embraced this concept of neutrality uh, had lots and lots of names. And they were called the Third World. You may have heard that term. The Developing World, the Emerging Nations, a non-aligned group. The term that's used primarily now is the Global South. You'll hear that term and the growing strength of the Global South. And we'll talk to that a little bit. But and also you're hearing the term the global majority. Now, there was a very important event that took place in the 1950s that impacted the world. And one of the leaders of this event was Nehru. Okay. There was a conference, and it was in Bandung, Indonesia in 1955. It was considered a milestone event of world history because it was the first meeting ever of all non-Western countries. None of the superpowers were invited to attend. None of them were. Um, Participating were about 29 countries. 17 of them were from Asia, primarily like Southeast Asia. There were also 8 Arab countries and 4 sub-Saharan countries. The countries that attended reflected 60% of the population of the planet at that point in time. They represented approximately half of the countries in the United Nations at that time. Their primary threads of their values, they were very anti-colonial. They wanted to promote ideals of nationalism and independence throughout the world. The 3 leaders in that group were Nehru, Sukarno, who is from Indonesia, and Nasser from Egypt. So India was a real major leader even back in the 50s because of its sheer size. It never wanted to side very closely with any of the major powers. And we'll see that they had many on again, off again conflicts with China. Basically, nothing binding came from this conference, but it solidified the whole concept of the third world. And I guess I would say that the United States in general, particularly the State Department and the CIA, could not really ever grasp what this group was about or how to manage this group. And they looked at this group with a great deal of suspicion. And that really impacted behavior and attitudes towards the third world throughout the subsequent decades, even to this day now, and impacted the attitudes in Southeast Asia and later Vietnam. A very important event that took place. I'm going to switch gears a little here. I'm jumping over the 4 decades or 5 or 6 decades of Indian history to the here and now. And we're going to talk about the leader of India named Narendra Modi. Narendra Modi was born in 1950. He has been the prime minister since 2014. He still is. He has been absolutely transformative in how he's changed the picture of Indian politics. The main reason he's changed the picture is that historically, and this is kind of true throughout South Asia, I've done topics research on in Philippines and Indonesia, very common there, and also here. Most of the leaders, virtually all the leaders, up until Modi, were all lineage based from well-known families. Perfect example is Nehru. His daughter was Indira Gandhi, became prime minister. Indira Gandhi had a son who was later prime minister. So there tended to be people from these upper echelon families which governed the country. This stopped with Modi. Okay. A little biography. He was born in 1950 in Gujarat, which was that province, as I pointed out on the map, all the way to the west of India, adjacent to Pakistan. He was a member of one of the lower caste systems. Okay, he was not a royal family or wealthy family at all. His father ran a tea shop. He has always tried to cultivate this image that he grew up in a poor but honest family. And we'll talk about this cultivation because sometimes the image and reality didn't have not always matched. His his pathway to leadership in the country of India was he became the chief administrator of the state. It's almost comparable to a governor of a state later becoming president. This was a unique path that had never been followed before. All right, I'm going to just backtrack on something that is important to understand because Modi just absolutely destroyed this. There was, when the state of India was created, there was a concept about the role of religion in the state, even though, remember, 80% of the state were Hindus. And this is the concept. Every religion has equal footing in the public sphere. Freedom religion is absolutely paramount. That despite the fact that the Hindus have a huge majority, they are subordinate to the will of the state. They absolutely cannot force their will on the state on state governance. Separation of church and state is paramount, but the reality has always been that the family lineage has been the key. Okay, so with that in mind, Modi created himself his own version of a strongman persona. We've seen strongmen around the world. There's a lot of books about strongmen, starting with Mussolini, Vladimir Putin, um, the leaders in Hungary, leaders in Egypt, some say the leaders in this country. I'll let you decide on that. In Israel, these strongmen personas that are in control of previously considered democracies, but for democracies that are getting a little bit more fragile. And every single country, every strongman seems to have a little bit of a different flavor to it. So some of the things I'm going to outline with Modi seem very similar to what you have observed around the country and around the world. And some of these things will appear to be have a little bit of a difference to them. Um, Modi always wanted to exploit Muslim violence, and there was on again, off again throughout the years of the country, uh, periodic Muslim violence, terrorist violence. Some of it was related to Pakistan, some of it was internal in India. Let's remember, because the Muslim population in India is 14%, when you have a size of 1.5 billion, that's 300 million Muslims. That's 300 million Muslims, okay? So that's a lot, okay? So he would always exploit that. He would often say, I am the only one who can protect the Hindus. He really cultivated a divide between Muslims and Hindus. Never been done before. He created a personality cult, pictures of him everywhere, flooding the TV screens and all of that. He was a very charismatic orator, is a charismatic orator, has a populist bent to him, very much. I am one of you, okay? I am a man of the people as opposed to the elites. As is true with strong men, they all want scapegoats. They blame everything on scapegoats. And what are the scapegoats in India that Modi attacked all the time? Muslims, most importantly, uh, just fostered a hatred between Hindus and Muslims and openly has favored Hindus throughout all fabrics of society. Now, another scapegoat. He calls them cosmopolitans, also use the term elites. We hear that term all the time now throughout the world, a typical populist thing, and it really pits one group versus the other and pits those that are elites, that are the others in a minority, and as the enemy. And he also talks about threats of immigrants and the threats of minorities in general. I bet you've heard that comment before. Okay. So his authoritarianism has manifested itself in a couple different ways. He has, since 2014, he has weakened the state institutions used to be really powerful, centralized and strong and compared to the central government. He has strengthened the central government and done everything he can to weaken state institutions. He has made Muslims in many, many ways second-class citizens and throughout many, many aspects of society. He has openly said, we are a Hindu state. We are a Hindu state, and that's it. And he sends that message all the time. He has an interesting uh, inclination to support and actually manifest and control vigilante groups throughout the country with lots of isolated attacks on Muslims. He is also postured as the enemy, journalists, academics, the intellectual community, NGOs, nonprofit organizations. Okay, he considers them the enemy. And he has also projected himself as the nation's savior, the only person that can protect everything. He has worked very, very hard to cultivate this image. Now, once again, the image and the reality are not always the same. There have been periodically, from time to time, attacks, terrorist attacks driven by Muslims. It's often a debate whether the attacks have been triggered from Pakistan or they've been internal. But these are just a few of them. There was a horrible attack where dozens of people died in Parliament in 2001. There was a suburban train attack where dozens of people died in 2006. You may have heard about the attack in 2008, where something like 30 or 40 in Mumbai attacked a luxury hotel and attacked the Jewish community center in Mumbai. Hundreds of people died in that attack. And there's always been debate about whether how much the Muslims in India and the Pakistani government have corroborated with one another. Whenever an attack like this is taking place, Modi immediately points the finger to Pakistan. Okay, immediately. His economic record. His overall growth has been hot and cold. It's been acceptable. At times, it's been very, very high. It's been as high as uh, 6.5%, which is very, very good. It's starting to slow down now, and we're going to talk about his electoral record in just a minute. He has focused a lot, which has been a good thing, on infrastructure development. Okay, infrastructure development. There has not been as much a focus, and we'll talk to this a little bit in the end, on manufacturing. This has been a core weakness of the record, the economics record of India. They are very strong in high tech support and service industries. They still have a very high dependency on agriculture, which is okay, and it helps to feed the country. But not having a strong manufacturing base increases their dependence, particularly on China. Their rural growth, the growth has declined. More people are moving to the cities. That's not always necessarily seen as a good thing, but that has very, very strongly happened. It's made the cities more and more crowded than ever. This is one thing he's not happy about being known that he had always cultivated an image of managerial competence and that he has a great, that he will hold big business to task. And in fact, he's been very, very quietly throughout his tenure, uh, a little bit too cozy with big business. There has been a thriving crony capitalism. Sometimes when you see the term crony capitalism, that's a code word for corruption. and there has been a lot of corruption. And this issue is starting to really get the people a little bit disillusioned with Modi as the leader. Environmental standards are lousy. They're just plain lousy. Of the 100 uh, most polluted cities in the world, 83 of them are in India. 83 are in India. It's not unusual at all in India for people to walk around outside on a normal day and just wear a mask. It's not unusual at all. I did observe that. I was in Delhi about 5 years ago. It is a very unfortunate situation. Last but not least, inequality, which was always a problem, is just getting worse. One of the striking things, and if any of you have a comment on this who have been to India, and I observe this, is observing the poverty in the big cities is really gut wrenching. It is truly, truly gut wrenching. And it's very, very difficult to see, and inequality is just everywhere in the country. Now let's just see the evolution here of how Modi has been embraced by the people. In 2014, when he first ran and was elected, he was the people were ripe for somebody like him. He immediately positioned himself as an outsider. He attacked all the people in government and as elites, as people who have been around too long, been too comfortable, and he presented himself as, I am one of you. I am one of you. That is a vintage populist pitch, sales pitch. And then he also fostered fear. And he attacked Muslims in the country, which was pretty astonishing. No politician had ever done that before. He would ask the rhetorical question, why is every terrorist in India Muslim? Is there a reason for that? Why is that happening? So that was very interesting in and of itself. He became very, very popular. He cultivated this image. He was reelected in 2019 by a landslide. He saturated the public space. This whole image, this whole cult was very, very big at that time. That he manifested. He took clear advantage in the 2019 election of incumbency, and he very, very much exploited the threats from Pakistan. Talked about them all the time. Okay, uh, he got reelected by a lot. Then 2024 came about. I should have put the next to last slide bullet point at the top. The results were worse than expected. Uh, he once again, the PR machine told everyone how great he was, but the people were clearly growing restive and less satisfied with him. They could see the corruption. They could see that rural areas were being ignored. They felt that only the big cities were, and big business was given a priority. They could also see that education was deteriorating. There were very troubling polls surfacing comparing the education system in India to other East Asian countries. And it was really falling flat compared to countries like even like Korea, like China, like Vietnam. It was getting behind the eight ball. Okay, I mentioned about the pollution, which is also a problem. So the results, interestingly enough, Modi did hold power, but now he is dependent. The only way he could maintain the power is he's dependent on coalitions of outside groups. So he does not have the firm grip and control that he used to. And that is at times causing problems. And we'll talk to that. Okay. So he is still in power, but he's a little bit more fragile than he has been in the past. His foreign policy has been pretty pragmatic. And this has followed a pretty similar foreign policy as in the past. He talks about the term multi-alignment. He doesn't say non-alignment. He says multi-alignment, which is kind of another way of saying, I'm going to be friends with everybody. Well, that's a very tricky balancing act to pull off in this day and age. I'm going to be friends with everybody. But India has tried to do that. I have these two examples. They are part of a group of countries called the Quad, which is a diplomatic partnership with the United States, Australia, India, and Japan. Uh, Besides the United States, the three largest economically countries in the area. And the US is trying to use the Quad as a bulwark against China. Very clearly, an anti-China. They just started a couple of years ago. Okay, an anti-China group. Then there is a group that China and Russia dominate called the Shanghai Cooperative. It's a security group. And guess what? India is a member of that as well. So it seems very, very contradictory, but they do try very hard to be everything to everybody. Kashmir. Let's talk about Kashmir for a minute. There was there has been ongoing conflict. This area here that's in the diagonals is what is Kashmir, okay? There are parts of Kashmir controlled by India, parts of Kashmir are controlled by Pakistan. And there's a group in the middle there, there's a line, a borderline, which is a line of control, and it's very, very similar to the parallel, the 38th parallel of Korea. Very, very hostile area there. There have been periodic areas of conflict, and what happened, uh, there was an episode of conflict in April of this year. Kashmir is an ancient kingdom that has a majority historically going back hundreds and hundreds of years. The Hindus have ruled, but the majority population is Muslim. Hence, this is a conflicted area. It has been split between India and Pakistan since day one, and it's claimed by both. There have been conflicts on and off since 1947. There was an attack in April of this year. 26 Indian tourists, 26 Indian tourists were massacred at that point in time. Immediately, India blamed the Pakistani government. There were attacks on Pakistan, missile attacks, but the world took note because of the fact that these two countries went nuclear, have nuclear weapons. How will this play out? Could it spiral out of control? There was back and forth, tit for tat attacks between India and Pakistan. Eventually, they both worked out a ceasefire. Both sides have on again, off again been accusing the other of violation. There seems to be restriction of information access. As I already said, there's always worries about nuclear weapons. One big thing that has been tossed aside is a water treaty. Indus is a river, very large river that goes through Pakistan and comes up through Kashmir and India. And there has been, in 1960, it was actually orchestrated by the World Bank at the time, a treaty that was put together that said that Pakistan would not limit the water coming through the river up through to its source in Kashmir and India. It's a very, very important. That river is important throughout all the sides here, and so also there was also references that India would not block the waterways as it flowed down in the other direction. Well, guess what? In this particular conflict, India said we're not going to abide by that, and we will do what we want with those waters, and that is considered a big deal. Time will tell how that plays out. Right now, it's very, very fragile. I want to tell you, I was actually very stunned. I heard a webinar recently between. I'm going to talk at the very end a little bit about a Pakistani pact with Saudi Arabia, and a Pakistani, a high member of the Pakistani government, made a comment with absolutely with just an assertiveness, which was stunning to me. And he said, let there be no doubt the country of Pakistan is engaged and has been since 1947 in an active war. That's the term he used, an active war, okay, against India. Uh, it's just not one of these percolated under the sheets, hostilities and things like that. They used the term active war, which was very surprising to me. And I suspect that few people around the world realize the depth of the hostility and hatred that is still out there. I heard a talk about 10 years ago from an expert on India. And this was astonishing to me. This is why I bring this up and I hammer this home. Uh, this person talked about India in so many interesting and insightful ways, but they did not make one mention of the hostile relationship with Pakistan. Not one. And what this tells me is that the world seems to be very indifferent to this hostile relationship and really doesn't seem to care until something like this attack took place in April of this year. And it seems like the whole issue is once again receding in the minds of the rest of the world. Interestingly, India and Pakistan they don't want to control or influence each other. And they really, other than Kashmir, are not trying to claim any other's territory. And we should be remembered that they both have nuclear weapons. They just positively hate each other. And it seems to be very, very much religion focused. And although it gets a lot of indifference from the rest of the world, the numbers of people on both sides of this, Pakistan has a population of something like 300 million, almost as big, 250 million, almost as big as the United States. Uh, and India, we know how big that is. So they should not be ignored. Also, they should not be ignored because they have nuclear weapons, and there's always a heightened risk of expansion to a war between the two nations. Let's talk for a few minutes about China. Uh, India and China have had also an on again, off again hostile relationship with one another, where they've actually had firefights with one another over the years. Not often, but there's been some tension. And now India looks at China as their rival, and they would like to consider someday overtaking China as the leading economics driver in Asia. I'll tell you right up front, I don't see that happening anytime too soon. China's got a lot of huge advantages. Their GDP is 5 times larger than India's. They definitely have a more sophisticated military. They've got stronger investment in state-of-the-art technology even than India does. There are some challenges in China. This is just touching a little bit on this. Their growth rate in economic growth rate is starting to recede. It's not what it used to be 10 to 20 years ago. They have demographic headwinds. The population in China is plunging, absolutely plunging. Okay. It is said that within the next 50 to 100 years, the population will go down by 30 to 50% in China. And that was all related to uh, the ignorant decision made in the late 70s of a one-child policy. And that has really wreaked havoc. And what basically took place is Chinese, uh, the males stayed in the country, and many, many millions of women who were children were sent to places like the United States as adoptees. And so what you have now is a very male-dominated society. And I'm going to give you an example of just how screwy this is. It's not unusual. I got an example of a village with about 10,000 people in it, a rural village. And of marriageable age, there were something like 1,500 men and 8 women. I mean, what a weird kind of society that is. And it has all sorts of unbelievable implications. So China's in a world of hurt, and they're going to continue to in many, many ways. And obviously, because the United States and others, they have some constraints to Western market access. Okay, let's talk about Donald Trump and what has been described. Notice this picture here, the two of them, Modi and Trump holding hands. Uh, what's been described as the bromance between Donald Trump and Narendra Modi. Modi and Trump immediately hit it off well when he first became president. Their styles, their approach towards illiberal democracy were somewhat similar. Uh, they got along very, very well. The relatively speaking harmonious relationship between the United States and India over the years basically continued. Problems have recently, just in the last 3 to 5 months, they've been going downhill for two major reasons. Okay. First of all, thinking big picture, uh, you're always going to ask the questions, what are the dynamics between these two countries? What are their shared interests? What are their shared, do they have shared interests? Well, yeah, they do. Their shared interests primarily are to watch China. And the US wants India to be their counterweight in Asia towards China and to some extent towards Russia. Uh, the values, well, they're both democracies. There's questionability about the fragility of both democracies, but they are really basically democracies still. This is important to know, and this is why India will always get the United States' attention. They just recently surpassed Britain as the fifth largest economy in the world. The only ones bigger are the United States, China, and interestingly, the two nations that we defeated in World War II, Germany and Japan. And it is expected that India by 2030 will surpass Germany and Japan to become the third largest economy in the world. So they're worth paying attention to. Anybody that has a large arsenal of nuclear weapons is worth paying attention to. Being the counterweight to China is always first and foremost on the United States foreign policy minds. Okay, uh, they do currently have a strong irritation with India's oil dependence and continuation of purchasing oil from Russia, especially because of the Ukrainian war. And they've continued to do this and been very, very strongly focused on continuing to do that. That has been a real source of anger by the upper echelon in the State Department in the United States. Okay. Another thing that has really irritated on a personal level with Donald Trump has been, I can't believe I'm even talking about this, has been the politics around a Nobel Peace Prize. Because I'll tell you, a very curious incident took place. Okay. When Pakistan and India got their ceasefire together, um, immediately Donald Trump jumped in and said, "There's another war that I stopped." Okay, I believe you may recall he's talked about stopping 7 or 8 wars and things like that. That's why he deserves the prize, which he seems incredibly obsessed with. Uh, anyway, uh, how the reaction was between Pakistan and India to these assertions by Donald Trump were totally different. Pakistan totally bought into uh, Donald Trump's pitch that you solve this war, and in fact, Donald, I'm going to nominate you for the Nobel Peace Prize. So that instantly gained favor, okay, with those people, with the Pakistanis in the eyes of Donald Trump. India did just the opposite. And what's interesting, first of all, what they did was they said, no, 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 no. Donald Trump had nothing to do with this ceasefire. It was totally between Pakistan and India. That infuriated Trump, absolutely infuriated him. And in fact, in stages, he first put on a 25% tariff on India, and then raised it to 50% tariff because of those statements by Modi. Now, we might ask ourselves, why did Modi do this? Whether or not it's the truth or Donald Trump's role, that's kind of irrelevant in this. What is relevant is how the two parties reacted to it, Pakistan and India. And India, his coalition partners, remember, he's dependent on coalition partners to stay in power. His coalition partners took tremendous offense to Trump and his assertion that he had uh, been the one who orchestrated this change. And so there was real personal animosity that surfaced here. And Modi was kind of stuck, and he had to follow what his coalition partners said and stand by them and say, you know what, this is the truth, and these comments, this is just Pakistan sucking up to Donald Trump. I'm not even going to get into whether that was true or not. What is humorous to me is these tariffs now, it's almost like a trade war has suddenly, just within the last 6 months, many people are saying that the relationship right now is the worst that it's ever been between the United States and India. And it just gets hot and cold. It's a whole pitch with tariffs, which are going to hurt the economy in India short term. And it's been just a hot and cold relationship. Time will tell, and it'll be interesting to watch this as it proceeds. Okay, moving quickly here. Modi, because of the tariffs, guess what Modi is doing? He has turned around and he has gone to China and reached out to China and tried to nurture relations with China. Okay, this is him in August, right after a huge tariff was slapped on India by Donald Trump, and China's absolutely welcoming India with open arms. Doesn't do too much for the United States as a counterweight to China. How that will play out, time will tell. Another thing, and I'm going to close with this, and this does relate to India. Uh, just a month and a half ago, a huge pact was pieced together by Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. A huge pact was put together by them. It's mainly an economics pact, but what is interesting is it's being watched very carefully, the implications by the United States, by India, and also by Iran, because what Pakistan has done is gone all in supporting the Gulf states. It's raised a lot of questions about whether or not Pakistan will share nuclear technology with Saudi Arabia. You know, we talked about the risk. We all know the risks if Iran gets nuclear weapons. What if Saudi Arabia gets nuclear weapons? Oy vey, this could have lots and lots of problems. And India, in turn, is watching carefully this. India has basically historically had a good relationship with the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia. And there's worries on India's part, is this going to impact that because of their hostile relationship with Pakistan? Now, these two parties claim that this is only economics oriented. Saudis are going to give Pakistanis military weaponry, state-of-the-art weaponry. India, of course, is not going to like that. Uh, but it's going to really, they claim, these two parties, this has nothing to do with nuclear weapons. Time will tell if that's true. This will be an interesting development. Okay, it's 10:59 now, and this is my last slide. Uh, what are India's challenges today? And there are lots more. There really isn't a good, robust manufacturing base. They haven't worked on doing that, on doing anything with that over time. It's very unfortunate. 50% of the population still is engaged in agriculture, is relatively primitive. It's not very state of the art. There's still small farmers out there, and it's just not generally a very good thing. Governance is starting to be more and more corrupted. It'll be very interesting to watch how if his decline in population continues to deteriorate. And I always say it a positive thing when a so-called strong man when that are in charge of fragile democracies, when the people eventually rise up and are so disgusted that they vote them out of office. So that is an interesting thing to watch. The demographics are strong in India, but the fertility rates in India are starting to go down. Nowhere near the fertility rates in China. Fertility rate in China is something like one child is a little over one child per woman, and in the United States, by the way, it's 1.6, and in India is 1.9. It's going down. The replaceable rate, you might find this interesting, for population to remain stable is 2.1. And the United States is certainly below that right now. And you know what keeps population in the United States stable? Is immigration. So that is a very, very interesting observation on that front. Uh, India has poor environmental standards. That's always going to be a problem. And this stance of neutrality is always a high risk stance to take. And they just kind of this whole idea of being on the outs with Trump and the United States, and so they immediately move over to China. How that will change over time, their relationship with Putin, those are things that remain very, very much up in the air. So with that, I hope I've given you some things to watch, to keep to be mindful of in their dynamics, interaction. And with that, I'm going to close this out. Oh, up here it is. And Grayson,
All right.
um, let's have any kind of questions. And I do want to say this. I say this in all my talks. I really firmly believe it. Um, if any of you have a comment, this doesn't have to be just questions, is my point. If your additional input, if your input relates to a strong opinion you have or something you feel that I missed or disagree with, that is absolutely fair game. We are all here to talk like civilized adults, unlike the people in Washington. And so that is absolutely fine. I'm happy to engage in conversation along those lines. Okay.
All right, we've got a couple questions, so keep submitting them in, and we'll read them as we get through them. A first question here is talking about China and India relations related to the resource of water. So this attendee is asking if you could speak about the large dam project that China is now looking to build in the Tibet region on the Yarlung Tsangpo River. It looks like that's could affect, the water resources that India has moving into the future.
Uh, Very good point. Uh, you know, this is a great decisions program. So I really want to make this statement here. I would like great decisions someday to have a topic that's totally on water scarcity in the world. I mean, water is such a big topic that surfaces everywhere. And these issues about dams, because rivers, of course, they transcend borders. And if a country outside of your country has access or control of water supply to your country, that impacts your country greatly. There could be causes of war that surface. There is a very big one that is quiet right now, but could surface into a big problem, is a dam by Ethiopia for the Nile and impacting water in Egypt. So back to China. China and India have had hot and cold um, relations over the years, and conflict, most of their conflict that's taken place historically, there were some real serious firefights in the 1960s, and India got clobbered by China at that point in Tibet, and there were also conflicts in on that border, on again, off again. I think 5 years ago, and so there's always that risk. And now the issue in that same area, the borders with Tibet, and as you probably know, Tibet was a sovereign nation years and years ago, and were taken over by China. And so there's a strong sense of nationalism there. And so they react very they react very sensitively to those kind of things in a big way. Uh, can this something be, is this something that can be worked out, negotiated? Obviously, the Indian stance on this is going to depend a lot on the relationship with the United States. If they feel they can get support from the United States in negotiating these dam issues with China, their negotiated stance will be a lot different than it is right now, where they're on the outs with with India, and they need to have an amicable relationship. So this is a perfect example of India being neutral, doesn't have a strong posture as they could if their relationship with the United States and others was on a more harmonious state. We'll see what plays out. But this whole issue of a dam and of water control is a big deal.
Yeah, definitely. And like you mentioned, there's a bunch of other places around the world that are going to be dealing with things like that too, it seems.
Going to be a big deal between and um, Ethiopia and Egypt. In fact, I'll tell you an aside by that. Egypt, which is stronger militarily than Ethiopia, has threatened to bomb the dam that they're building. And at the dam site in Ethiopia, they have 10,000 Chinese workers there. Oh my God, what if they bomb it and thousands of Chinese workers die? So this is how things can just percolate and get engaged other countries that you wouldn't think otherwise.
Right. Yeah. Okay, moving on. Next questions are about India seeming like you've mentioned, they're on a strong growth trajectory upwards. So what factors could derail them domestically or internationally?
Well, uh, I think domestically, there are some smallish things that over time are going to accelerate. And one of them is environmental. I mean, their environmental record is just abysmal. To imagine having a record of 83 of the 100 most polluted cities in the world are in India. I mean, that is absolutely an abysmal record. Okay, um, and their inequality. Uh, it just seems like there is an opportunity to gaining wealth and to get prosperity in India, but the numbers of people below the poverty line, and I don't know exactly what they are. I would say they're easily 20, 30, 40%, is just way too high. And the slums in those big cities, in Delhi, in Calcutta, in Mumbai, are just are just horrible, and they're just horrible to see. So those are the things societally that really worry me. And I also worry about this stance of neutrality. In a perfect world, obviously, I wish that India would side more assertively on the side of the United States uh, in some of these conflicts. It has been disappointing to me that and disappointing to the world that they just refuse. They've really taken a neutral stance on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And why is that? Because they have the dependence on oil. And I think that the two biggest things long term that are going to impact them in their posture globally is their energy dependence on Russia and the manufacturing dependence. Where do they get cheap manufacturing goods? From China. Is their dependence on China? And so, where those things are going to fall, I think, are a real source of concern. Notice I haven't even mentioned this uh, this unstable. I wish there could be a ceasefire that came to be at least some decent kind of a truce with Pakistan. Because as long as this active hostility is out there, this hostility should not be ignored. And as long as the two of them have nuclear weapons, that should always be a source of concern. And let this be known absolutely. I've asked this question many times to many groups. What is, why is it that Pakistan developed nuclear weapons program? course, the reason is because India got one. Once India developed one, within 5 years, Pakistan had one. And so these are kind of dangerous type of developments in and of themselves.
Yeah. You covered touched on some of the topics of some of the next questions we'll ask, but speaking of India's energy dependence on Russia, if India and Modi are, friends or allies with Saudi Arabia, why are they buying their oil from Russia and maybe not investing in energy from Saudi Arabia?
I my sense is, I don't know this for certain, but my sense is that they want to spread things out and they want to spread out their risks. Okay, they want to spread out their risks. And so to do that, they buy oil from various different groups. Frankly, this one of the other byproducts of the Saudi-Pakistani agreement, I sense, and frankly, I worry, is that'll just push Modi even further to Putin, okay, and further away from the Gulf, which will, frankly, I think hurt Modi in many ways, economically, militarily, whatever, and just push him under Putin's umbrella. And I can just see Vladimir, the minute this thing got finalized between Pakistan and Saudis, uh, Putin called Modi. I don't know this for a fact, but he called him and said, "Hey, buy more oil from us. You can't trust Saudi Arabia now. They are getting in bed with your enemy. You can't trust them." So that's why I brought this pact up because it so much impacts Modi, and how things will unfold there is going to be very, very interesting to observe.
Do you see, with Modi being sort of a cult of personality in the country, and I think last year's 2024 elections, there were some gains from opposition parties and whatnot.
Yes,
Do
very
you see,
definitely.
his, you know, reign of power ending soon, or do you think he's going to continue for another, 10 years?
I think, well, first of all, he's 75 years old now, so I'm not sure for the sake of time, but I think it's going to continue to decline because I don't see a lot of turnaround there unless this attack on the Indian terror by on Indian tourists in Kashmir, that was a manna from heaven for Modi. Because whenever there's a Muslim attack, he can say, "See, you need me." Okay, but otherwise, I think that generally speaking, it will decline uh, in power, and he can't necessarily dictate exactly what he wants to do. My sense, and this is just my opinion here, is had he not had that coalition that he's required to be amicable with in government to stay in power, he would have fallen right into the same trap as Pakistan in in praising Trump for stopping the war and everything else. And it was just a very interesting sidelight where the opposition took tremendous offense by that, and they felt that Trump was insulting the sovereignty of the country of India. Uh, and so they absolutely said, no, we are not going to lie. That's what they said, lie and say that Donald Trump stopped this war.
Hmm. Talking more about Kashmir, do you, a couple of viewers are just wanting some clarification again on the importance of Kashmir, and if there's any interest in independence for that region, maybe from, people that may live in that area or between Pakistan and India.
Okay, that's a very good question. Uh, I think what's fostered now, and it's just been something that's permanent and probably will be into the future, is uh, is driven by ego, by nationalist ego, and Pakistan and India, for their own reasons, say we're going to hold on to our part of that turf, and we're not going to give any of that up. And if they negotiated, to me, why don't you just call them independent states? The Pakistani controlled part is part of Pakistan, and the other is part of India, and just call it a day. And right now, it's just ego that's keeping this as at an impasse. And I don't see either of those countries taking the risk to quote unquote invade the other, sort of like North Korea and South Korea, which of course did happen in 1950, in the early 1950s. I don't see that happening here because there's just they're both nuclear powers. There's not a lot that would be gained there. So I have a feeling that deep down, the two of them are just satisfied with what they have. The hostilities between them are just very, very much religious oriented and ego oriented, and nothing more. And so tragically, I think that what'll play out is that we're going to have this continuous impasse, which has been there since the late 1940s. I think that's going to play out that way for the future.
Interesting. Um, we've got a few more questions here that I'll ask. So if anybody else has questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A and we'll get to them. Here's some questions, and we can go as deep or as surface level as we want here, but about um, U.S. and India relations in terms of outsourcing, and then also the H-1B visas. I think that's been a sort of a big topic of what's going to happen between that with this administration and moving into the future. So, any thoughts on those?
Well, a couple of statistics that I forgot to mention, which you might find interesting, is related to this. In 1990, there were about 1 million uh, Indians, India Americans, okay, had moved here and lived here, and their families, either for them or their generation, were from India. 1 million. And in 2022, that number was 4.4 million, and now it's between 5 and 6 million. So Indian Americans, just like people talk about electorate and everything, uh, they're part of of a genuine electoral populace that have political uh, ideas. And uh, what I've been curious about, whether or not I wasn't thinking of it in the context of visa, but that's a very, very good point, Grayson. But I'm thinking of it and curious because I've heard this about about ICE being in some of these capitals, DC, LA, Chicago, moving, they could very well move into New York, whatever. Um, what has been prominent from what I have observed is people of color being looked at risk, being pulled aside. Well, some people of color are from India, and how that's going to play out, and exactly where that will how that will impact things, or even conceivably long term, if this nonsense about the Nobel Peace Prize continues, and this whether or not this could turn out to be a real negative concern with the relationship of the two countries, because diasporas do make a difference over time, and it's growing a lot. I'll tell you another interesting statistic to talk about the impact of the Indian diaspora in the United States. Um, it is said that 1 in 10 physicians in the United States come from the Indian diaspora. Many of you, I'm sure, have physicians or interact with physicians that came from the Indian diaspora, and so they are making their mark on this country in a very, very big way. And whether or not that will transform into things politically, because of visa, because of ICE actions, whatever, is going to be an interesting thing to observe.
Yeah. Um, a question about sort of maybe the trajectory of India and what they can overcome or move toward in relation to the caste system that's still pretty predominant in India. Is do you see that sort of hindering things, or um, thoughts on that?
Absolutely, it'll hinder things. The caste system, which has been embedded for really for centuries. India is a very, very old country, and we didn't have time to get into the history of India. But India is a very, very old country. This is where Buddhism was started. Uh, there's a city on the west coast of India called Cochin, which had a prominent Jewish population at one point in time. Um, there's a very, very interesting and rich history of India going back centuries. And then, of course, we all know they were controlled by Britain for 200 or 300 years prior to 1947. So where things stand, where things will go is very, very hard to tell at this point in time. The caste system is something that is slowly, glacially, slowly breaking down. And on one hand, it's interesting and good thing to see Modi, somebody coming to the top who started out with his father running a tea shop in a rural area of a distant state. I think that's a very positive thing. That had never happened before. But I think and I fear that all of these changes, the caste system, the inequality, things like that, are going to move glacially. They're going to move for the better, but very, very slowly.
Hmm. So, talking about the relations between Hinduism and Islam within India, uh, this question is talking about Modi ramping up religious tensions between Muslims and in India. So, comments on that, and then maybe how the tenets of Hinduism work with that ramping up of persecution of that religious minority.
Well, I'm not really don't know too much about the tenets of his Hinduism, but I do know that Modi was so open. You know how sometimes, and even with his politics, there are some extreme commentary made, and things are said, but they're said in code. Historically, that's been true in this country, I think. Lots of things have been said and done in code, not out there and just said, I hate this ethnic group, period. Well, Modi said that in a way about Muslims. They are all terrorists. They are all bad people. You can't trust them. They can't be part of a group. And they've been just totally, and that was completely counter to the tenets of the establishment of the government that Hindus, although we're 80% of the government, in 1947 said they do not control the sphere, the public sphere. They will not ever control the public sphere. Modi destroyed all that. He said it's all the Muslims' fault. It's all the Muslims' fault. And if he had his power, and he has less of it now, he would just throw them, would he go too far as to just try to throw them all out of the country? I don't know. But it has just been astonishing how out there he has been towards the Muslim population. And once again, the Muslim population, although it's just 15% or so, is still a formidable size when you think about having 200 million Muslims in India. Interestingly, the largest Muslim population nation in the world is Indonesia, but number two is actually India. There are actually more Muslims in India than there are in Pakistan, although 96% of Pakistan's population is Muslim and only 15% is Indian. But that's more a product of the disparate sizes of the two countries. So there are a huge number of Muslims in in India, and this has to have an impact. I really have never studied it, but it has to have an impact of Indians' relationship with Muslim-dominated countries in the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia. If they're persecuting their Muslims at home, that has to have an impact. So that'll be something interesting to observe. And that's why this pact between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia does and can possibly have a strong impact on Indian concerns.
Interesting. Um, One question is about the economy of India. So, where are the biggest influences, maybe in the global scale, of what India produces or exports um, that are sort of serving that country?
The most visible export are its people and its high-tech know-how and its tremendous movement towards high tech in India. You have probably seen, so these are service industries, and it's been a source in the United States. You may have heard this of annoyance that when you call a help desk for an airlines for this or that, that you get a call center from India. Uh, Very, very common thing to do. You can only imagine the type of employment that these call centers around Bangalore, places like that, create. It's just a tremendous, tremendous, impactful thing. And the other is agriculture. Uh, the agriculture doesn't uh, move itself very often beyond the borders of India. And it probably is more prominent than we would like it to be. What is really hurting is they do not seem to be able to foster a strong manufacturing base. And because of that, the manufacturing base, they have a lot of people, okay, and they're dependent on China. I forgot to mention there's a quote uh, about India by a demographer that said India needs to get rich before it gets old. In other words, you've got all these people resources and utilize them to gain more wealth faster. And ultimately, what could happen in, let's say, 50 years from now is the same problem is happening in China where they're going to get old. And too many people will be at that point in time an older age and not much of a youth bulge. Right now, there is a strength of a youth bulge that's manifesting itself, but that's going to pass. And so there's a timing thing there. So India's got a lot of issues that they got to be mindful of. The biggest is to figure out a way to set up and establish a better manufacturing base beyond just uh, high-tech service industry.
Yeah, great insight. We have about 3 minutes left. I have one comment, and then maybe I'll ask you for some final thoughts. But going back to your, percentage breakdown of uh, it's about 15% Muslim in India. And, it sounds like such a small percentage, but you're right. I mean, a country of 1.4 billion, 15% is still about 200 million people. So it's such a large number, when you do the math. Final thoughts, Henry, on the state of India, what we might be looking for in the future in the news, any wrap up for today?
Well, the I think the current spat between India and the United States is short-lived. I think that at some point this is going to be short-lived. What it will be interesting to observe is whether or not short-term uh, it has a very detrimental impact on the economy of India. I sense that it will a little bit, but not so much long-term. I think the concerns uh, uh, to look at. I am very troubled by this attitude towards Muslims in the country of India and this approach. And a lot of it, once again, is ego driven. It seems like it worked for a while for Modi, but it isn't a liberal democracy, but it is still a democracy. And unlike somebody like Vladimir Putin, who gets 98% of the vote, he does still, Modi, have to answer to the will of the people to some extent at least. So I think based on his age, I haven't looked at the other the other people coming up the ranks or anything like that. I am hopeful. I am hopeful that future leaders in India are not going to be so uh, nasty towards 15% of their population. I think that the impasse with Pakistan, the hostility is just going to continue. And we just have to hope that nothing ever explodes beyond, there'll be a tragic attack here or there, 20, 30 people will die, there'll be a missile attack back, and then they'll come to an agreement and say, okay, let's stop this, which is what I sense happened with Kashmir. So to me, I hate to put it this way, but I'm very pleased that the temperature seems to have been lowered. I'm not even going to get into whether our US president had anything to do with it or not. I don't think he did, but I may be wrong on that. But anyway, uh, there are a lot of concerns with the sheer size. The cities in India are a mess. They're crowded, they're polluted, huge amount of beggars everywhere. And so uh, there are a lot of concerns and issues, but there are a lot of good things happening as well. And the high tech in India, particularly around down near Bangalore, is quite formidable. And there are lots and lots of smart people. And what I actually worry about for India's sake is that the smartest people will move to the United States. Then again, there's the talk about the United States and their immigration and maybe not getting accepted. So those are all challenges to think about, but a very interesting country to watch, and I urge you to do so.
Yeah, thank you for a very informative and interesting and thought-provoking presentation today, Henry. And thanks for the questions from all of our attendees. Thanks for joining for today's Great Decisions. This is the last of this fall's Great Decisions topics. So we'll see you again in the winter. So everybody have a wonderful weekend. Thanks, Henry.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.